Grand Haven Township for a residential fire at Riverside Trail. White smoke coming out of the window. House is full of smoke seen from the outside and smells electrical. Central clear at 11:46.
It's a tragedy that has unveiled the darkness of the man who investigators say caused it.
Preliminary indications are that the fire was intentionally set in numerous different places throughout the residence on the interior of the home.
Police say he killed his wife and their 6 children before lighting their house on fire. It is an unspeakable act of violence, and now the alleged reality of who this man was and what was going on potentially in his life is starting to come to light. We're on the case, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart.
Grand Haven Township. Residential fire. White smoke coming out of the window. House is full of smoke seen from the outside. Smells electrical. That's the entire call. For sentences, radioed in like 100 other calls that go out every single day across this country. Nobody on that dispatch line knew they were describing the last page of 8 lives. Picture it from the street. A quiet road called Riverside Trail, a house with a driveway, a lawn, the kind of home you'd drive past without a second look. Now picture that same house with smoke curling out of an upstairs window while, inside, firefighters are about to walk into a scene that will reclassify itself 3 times before the day is over. First a fire, then a mass casualty event, then a homicide investigation. That's the image to hold on to. A house that looked like safety from the outside, and wasn't. Before we go deeper into what the records actually show, make sure you're subscribed to the Crime Infinity, because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. Here's what we know from the official record. On Friday, July 24th, crews responded to that fire call just before noon. According to statements from the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office, once inside, firefighters found the entire family, 8 people dead, 2 adults, 6 children, ranging in age from 5 to 15. Authorities have not released the children's names.
The beach. Now, all of this makes what allegedly happened on Friday, July 24th, so difficult to comprehend.
Grand Haven Township for a residential fire at Riverside Trail. White smoke coming out of the window. House is full of smoke seen from the outside and smells electrical. Central clear at 11:46.
That's the call that came in just before noon last Friday, dispatching crews to the family's home. Earlier that morning, police say someone had reported smelling smoke, but hours later, it was clear that a fire had started.
You have light smoke showing. Initial crews, established water supply. We'll be stretching a hand line to the alpha side. It's going to be an offensive fire, and I'll be doing a 360 shortly.
Once inside the home, police say they found the entire family, all 8 members, dead.
Units made entry inside to battle the fire because there was smoke showing from the residence. When they got inside, they noticed that there was numerous people deceased inside the home. They then notified the sheriff's office, and we began an investigation into that. So what I can tell you at this point is that 8 people are dead inside the home. There's 2 adults and 6 children.
That's a news conference per WZZM television in Michigan. As police investigated further, they say they realized something very dark may have happened before the fire.
Well, I can tell you that there's 2 adults in the residence as well. Some of the victims that we're calling victims inside the residence at this point did have gunshot wounds to their bodies. We don't have cause of death at this point. I don't know. I don't have 100% identification at this point. I can tell you that 2 adults and 6 children are deceased. We're pending further investigation and full autopsy results, which will be tomorrow afternoon or tomorrow morning.
Any idea what caused the fire?
We're looking into that. We're being assisted by the Michigan State Police arson investigators to see if it was intentionally set. So they're here. They've been on scene for quite some time. We've had numerous units on scene trying to get to the bottom of both the fire and the deaths.
Can you confirm how many victims had gunshot wounds?
Not at this point. No, that'll be pending further autopsy and further investigation.
Is there any further ongoing threat to the public?
We believe that everybody who's involved in the situation is in the
What they have released through post-mortem examination is this. The cause of death for every person in that house was gunshot wounds. The manner of death for the mother, Amanda Carowitz, and for all 6 children, was ruled homicide. The manner of death for the father, Christopher Carowitz, was ruled suicide.
The residents.
How could this have happened? How could a family that seemed to be happy be at the center of a tragedy like this? Christopher reportedly worked as the National Vice President of Sales and Marketing for the American Heart Association. Through the weekend, people tried to figure out what was going on before authorities were called to the house for that fire. Then, this week, the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office shared what their investigation had found.
The deceased adults are Christopher Carowitz, age 47 of Grand Haven, and Amanda Carowitz, age 39 of Grand Haven. The couple were married. The 6 deceased Carowitz children's name will not be released at this time. These include males ages 15, 12, 11, and 5, and females age 11 and 11. 4 of the children were biological children, and 2 were adopted. After the post-mortem autopsies, it was determined that the cause of death for all the subjects involved in this was ruled gunshot wounds, and the manner of death for Amanda and the 6 children was ruled homicide. The manner of death for Christopher has been ruled suicide.
Sit with that distinction for a second, because it's the entire case in 2 words. Homicide. Suicide. 2 rulings, 1 house, 1 night. And investigators say the fire itself, set, according to preliminary findings, in multiple locations throughout the interior, came after. Not an accident that turned deadly. A structure that was, according to authorities, deliberately set on fire around a scene that had already happened.
Additionally, after checking with the Michigan State Police Fire and Arson investigators, it was determined they're working to identify the cause and origin of the fire. We don't have that official report yet, but preliminary indications are that the fire was intentionally set in numerous different places throughout the residence on the interior of the home.
To this point, law enforcement believe that the violence could have started the night before, and then the fire was carried out in the morning, but at this point it's unclear. Police say they recovered a handgun from the scene, and they also say there were multiple spots in the house where the fire was set. They are, though, still going through video evidence, trying to figure out a timeline of what happened. The sheriff was asked about Christopher's potential motive for allegedly taking the lives of his wife and their 6 kids.
Were there any triggers for Chris as far as possibly his job or any divorce proceedings, anything like that that could have brought an answer to any of this?
That's a good question. That's still part of the ongoing investigation. We're just now getting started in the investigative portion. So obviously most of the first day was entirely on-scene investigation, and now we'll dig in some of the background motives and all those type of things, but I don't have that for you right now.
This is where the record and the public image of this family stop matching. According to statements from friends and family circulating after the tragedy, Amanda was remembered as a devoted mother, a substitute teacher, someone who documented family trips and had, just weeks earlier, reportedly traveled to China with 2 of her daughters.
Christopher Carowitz. There's no reason that will ever make sense for what happened inside his home in Grand Haven, Michigan, and we'll get into what appears to have been going on in his life in just a moment. Christopher Carowitz and his wife Mandy were raising 6 kids, ages 5 to 15. Police haven't released the names of their children. Reportedly, 2 of the kids were adopted from China.
Okay, we're heading to breakfast, and we got to figure out our laundry situation today.
Earlier this month, Mandy appears to have taken their 2 daughters to China on a trip. And what sticks out as we follow reaction to this story, we see the videos that she posted on social media, is just how loving of a person Mandy appears to have been. How loving of a mom Mandy was. One friend wrote on Facebook, quote, "She was an incredible wife, the most amazing mom, a loving aunt, cousin, daughter, colleague, stylist, friend, and so much more. She touched so many lives, and anyone who had the privilege of knowing her was better because of it."
This summer, for the first time, we decided to do a bucket list where we all get to add little things on it we want to make sure we get done during the summer. Because last year, August crept up on us and we didn't get anything done.
Mandy seemed to love documenting family trips. And here's a picture of her husband, Christopher, with one of their kids at the...
Christopher, according to public employment records referenced by multiple outlets, had worked as a national vice president of sales and marketing for a major nonprofit health organization. Employment that, per a statement from that organization, had ended earlier in the month. No public reason has been given for why.
In the wake of this news, the American Heart Association released a statement to media outlets that said that Christopher was a former staff member and his employment had ended earlier this month. They have not said why he no longer worked for the organization. Now, as far as Christopher's relationship with his wife, several media outlets, including the Detroit News, have pointed out posts that Mandy appears to have made on Reddit in 2024. And in these posts, she talked about issues she had in her marriage with Christopher. Now, the screen name on Reddit is Mandy K1179. And this screen name posted often about life in Grand Haven, Michigan, about being a mom to 5 kids, and her dream of being a teacher. She also was not afraid to share that her husband, she says, had cheated on her, and it nearly split them up. She posted in a group that's called As One After Infidelity, and there is this lengthy post, and I'm going to read it for you. Quote, "I feel you, my WH."
On paper, this was a family with a job, a mortgage, a bucket list taped to a refrigerator somewhere. That's the gap this case forces you to look at directly, the space between what a household presents to the world and what investigators say was actually happening inside it. A file can only tell you what was documented. It can't tell you what was felt behind a closed door. That's the phrase worth carrying through this entire case. The file only tells you what was documented, not what was felt. Now here's where public records, specifically posts attributed to a Reddit account associated with Amanda, add a layer investigators have not officially confirmed, but that multiple outlets have reported on. In posts dated to 2024, under a username linked to her, a woman describing her life in Grand Haven wrote about surviving infidelity in her marriage, describing an affair her husband allegedly had with a much younger coworker, years after the two of them had met under similar circumstances. She wrote about therapy, about rebuilding her self-worth, about being told by a marriage counselor that infidelity, even years later, never fully leaves a relationship, that it stays lodged somewhere in a spouse's memory permanently.
And I'm going to read it for you. Quote, "I feel you. My WH," and it appears she's using internet slang to talk about her husband, "literally cheated with a younger version of me, except way wilder than I ever was. When my H and I met, husband, I was the intern at the company we both worked for. He was divorced and older than me. Fast forward 10 years and 5 kids. He was cheating with the intern again, the same age I was when I was the intern. I was 5 babies in and actually not in bad physical shape, but I was in the trenches of little kids and just couldn't be who I was before. He had gotten a bonus literally days after D-Day, and I told him I was using it to pay off my credit card, to get Botox, Invisalign, hair extensions, and new clothes that made me feel pretty. I lost tons of weight during the aftermath, but guess what? I never felt better from those things. I still internally blamed myself for not being enough of what he wanted. After about a year of self-loathing, I remember crying and looking at myself in the mirror and realizing how up it was. I was the one who was living so miserably because of what he did. I finally realized that I had been the only person who ever showed up for myself my whole entire life. I didn't deserve to treat myself the way I had been. I decided to rewrite my brain as best as I could. I literally filled up journal upon journal upon journal with nice things about myself, even if I didn't believe them. I stopped dressing for him. I chose to dress for myself. I experimented with my natural curls and wore less makeup. I really leaned into the spiritual experience of getting to know and appreciate myself. It was the best thing I ever did for myself. Don't get me wrong. I sometimes still feel insecure. And 4.5 years out from D-Day, which appears to be the day she's talking about when she found out about this alleged affair, I still occasionally get triggers that suck me in. But my self-esteem is now able to withstand those triggers. Instead of resorting to, "I'm the worst, I hate myself," I now find my internal dialogue being more, "I don't deserve this. Why am I still living like this?" type talk. She goes on to say the most ironic thing about it is that now my WH finds my self-confidence to be super attractive. I mean, I think he finds it a little scary too, because he knows that I now know I deserve better than what he gave me in the past and won't tolerate any cheating in the future, which is a win-win, I guess. In another post, she says that she believes the affair that she says Christopher had with a coworker was, quote, more physical than he ever admitted to. Back in 2024, she talked about how the couple was in marriage counseling. She says that their therapist made it clear to Christopher that, quote, just know even if things are, quote, good, this is forever a part of your spouse's psyche. Even when things are good.
If those posts are accurately attributed, and we want to be careful here, because attribution through a screen name is not the same as a court-verified document. They describe a marriage that had already survived one crisis and was, on the surface, still standing. Counseling. Time. A choice to stay together, reportedly for the sake of the children.
Joining us now to talk more about this is family law attorney Randy Kessler. There's just no words for the loss of life in this story. And obviously here on Law and Crime and in the true crime world, we're frankly often and almost always talking about loss of life. But the scale here is just, it's unimaginable, especially with the ages. You have these Reddit posts that have been reported by several media outlets having belonged to Mandy Carowitz. And she talks about infidelity back in 2024. And Christopher, according to these posts, was cheating on her. And then it was something that they really tried to work through. Knowing what happened last week, and you kind of see these posts, you piece together that it appears that he left his job earlier this month. What stands out to you, kind of as we're piecing together all of this?
Yeah, well, just based on what you just said, first of all, if you were to say, I want to come up with a checklist of the most sympathetic victims of a horrific crime, right? This would check all the boxes: children, faithful wife, mother, a saint, pretty much as far as a parent, number one. Number two, there are signals. You can never predict this, and you never want to victim blame, and you never want to say, well, things could have been different had she, but, you look back at it and, gosh, so they met when she was an intern and he was much older and divorced, and then he had an affair with somebody similar to that years later. And then she said, I want to stay in the marriage for the sake of the children, which, these are all things we hear all day long, but, sort of like that perfect storm or death of a thousand cuts. There are all these factors that keep coming into it. Then she was talking about it, or she was talking about how to overcome it. And she was in private groups talking about, and maybe therapeutic for her, how do you survive adultery? How do you survive an affair in your relationship? All these things coming together, and his instability, maybe having multiple affairs, maybe, just losing his job. We don't know why. All these things come together, and it just points out one thing. Human beings are unpredictable and have dark sides to them. And this, deepest, darkest, and she had no idea she was, that he was like that, or she would have gotten out a lot sooner, I'm sure. She thought he was a bad guy. He cheated, lost his job, but God knows what was going on in his mind, and unfortunately, it's a lot worse than anybody knew, especially her.
None of that, according to any record made public so far, included documented reports of physical violence, restraining orders, or police contact for domestic disturbance at that address. That absence matters. It's the detail that turns this from a case with warning signs into a case that, on paper, had none. So ask yourself the question this case forces onto anyone reading the file cold. How does a household with no documented history of violence end in the single worst outcome imaginable, twice over, in one night? That's not a question a fire report can answer. It's not a question a 911 transcript can answer. It's a question that sits entirely inside a mind no one can now interview, because the person who could answer it made sure, according to the medical examiner's ruling, that he would never have to. That's the second time this case runs into the same wall. He will never be prosecuted. There is no trial coming, no cross-examination.
This is a statement the Grand Haven Public Schools put out that talks about support now being put in place for students who have been impacted by the horror that happened inside of that house on Friday of last week. In the news conference announcing the latest in the investigation, the sheriff was asked about what this investigation now looks like. Christopher is dead. He's the one they say did this. He will never face prosecution for what authorities are now alleging. He'll never have to answer why he did it because he took his own life.
Well, there's, no prosecution that takes place. When the suspect is also deceased, there's no prosecution that takes place, but it doesn't change in the fact that we're trying to get answers for family, we're trying to get answers for the community, we're trying to get answers for our own responders, and the only way to get those answers is to do a full, fair, thorough, detailed, complete investigation. It's not always fast, but to do a fair and thorough and detailed investigation gives those answers to family, to neighbors, to the community, to the responders that went there. So that takes some time, but eventually people are all going to want those answers, and that's why we work hard to try to get them honest answers.
No moment where a detective sits across a table and asks the one question every person following this story wants answered: why? Investigators have said plainly that they intend to keep working the case regardless, reviewing video evidence, building a timeline, trying to determine whether the violence inside that home began, as some evidence reportedly suggests, the night before the fire was set the following morning. But building a timeline is not the same as building a motive.
And for this part of the story is really hard it's all hard, but like this part where, all the children were found in their bedrooms, according to police, so it just seems like this was, on one hand, snapping, but then at the same time, the amount of time that potentially took inside the home and then lighting fires in multiple locations where it just seems like it was a plan, a horrific plan that was played out in a lot of these cases, because Christopher Carowitz will not be prosecuted. He will not answer to what he did because he took his own life, and there will be so many unanswered questions because of that. But typically, like, what happens now in these types of cases, knowing that so much damage was done, and yet the person that should be held accountable is no longer with us?
Well, the very slim silver lining is that we, the taxpayers, are not going to pay any money to bring justice. He did it himself, and he took care of that part of it. But, there's no other culprit, there's no other person of interest, no other person of suspicion. But I think law enforcement has to look and see, just in case, was there anybody that knew this was going to happen, that facilitated it? I don't know that they would be culpable if he told somebody something crazy, like one day I might just go snap and kill my family. I don't think that person would be held culpable. But the question is, how can we make sure
you can document every minute of what happened? You still may never document why it happened. The file only tells you what was documented, not what was felt. There's a particular cruelty in how this case is structured, and it's worth naming directly instead of stepping around it. Every sympathetic detail attached to this family, the adopted children, the recent trip, the substitute teaching job, the marriage counseling, the effort to rebuild after betrayal, all of it existed in the same house, at the same time, as whatever was actually happening in one person's mind. Those two realities were not in conflict from the outside. They were simply invisible to each other. That's not a plot twist. That's how these cases work almost every time they happen. The public file and the private collapse run on separate tracks until, suddenly, they don't. Law enforcement has been direct about one more piece of this, the accountability question. With the only named party in the homicide deceased, there is no defendant, no sentencing, no courtroom outcome that any advocacy group or family member can point to. The only mechanism left is the investigation itself, determining, as fully as the evidence allows, exactly what happened and in what order, so that the record is at least complete, even if justice in the traditional sense is not available. That's a colder kind of resolution than most true crime cases offer. There's no verdict coming. There's only a finished file. Which brings us to the third and final time this needs to be said plainly, because it's the whole reason cases like this deserve careful coverage instead of headline coverage. The file only tells you what was documented, not what was felt. Somewhere between a Reddit post about rebuilding self-worth after betrayal and a dispatch call describing smoke coming out of a window, there is a gap that no autopsy, no arson report, and no investigation update has closed. Maybe it never will. That's not a failure of the investigators working this case. It's simply the limit of what physical evidence can tell you about a human mind. If you want to look at the primary record yourself rather than take secondhand summaries at face value, the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office has released official statements and press briefing transcripts related to this case, and the Michigan State Police fire and arson investigation findings will become part of the public record as that portion of the inquiry concludes. Both are worth reading directly rather than through aggregation. And we want to hear your honest read in the comments. based strictly on what's been documented so far. When a case shows no prior police contact, no restraining orders, no formal reports of violence, what should investigators, family courts, or even employers be watching for that current systems clearly are not catching? If you're finding value in this kind of case breakdown, built from statements, rulings, and records rather than speculation, make sure you're subscribed to the Crime Infinity. Drop a like so this reaches more people trying to understand how these cases unfold. Share it with someone who'd rather read the file than the headline. And turn on notifications, because as this investigation continues and more of the record becomes public, we'll be back with what it actually says. If you or someone you know is in crisis, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available 24 hours a day. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, the National Domestic Violence Hotline can be reached at 1-800-799-7233 or online at thehotline.org. Also available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.